In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem asking, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star at its rising and have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all of Jerusalem with him. And calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet. And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people, Israel." Then Herod secretly called for the wise men and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word so that I may also go and pay him homage." So they had heard the king, they set out, and there, ahead of them, went the star that they had seen at its rising, until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Happy New Year. Well, I figure we'll start the new year off with a little heresy. And this is a very serious topic, so bear with me. But I think that Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom is just as good as the rest of the Indiana Jones trilogy. And I stand by that, and I will stand by it for the rest of 2017. So for the cinematic purists among you, please indulge me for just a moment as I tell you the tale of Dr. Henry Indiana Jones and his journey to Pankot Palace. Lost in northern India, Indy and company traverse afar to a small village where they learn that the sacred stone that had protected the villagers has been stolen, along with all of the children from the village. And these children were trafficked into Pankot Palace, into the mines deep below the bowels of the palace property. Short Round, his pre-adolescent sidekick, reports to Indiana Jones that the children are captive in the same place as the stolen sacred stone. And Indy, the ever-opportunistic treasure hunter / academic archaeologist par excellence, reveals his suspicion that these stones probably are one of the mysterious Shankara stones. And full of innocence and wonder, Short Round looks at Indy and he says, "What is Shankara?" And Indy, looking off in the distance, replies with 7 simple words emblazoned and immortalized on the silver screen: "Fortune and glory, kid, fortune and glory." History, it seems, turns in pursuit of these two elusive dreams. Empires and kingdoms are built on the egos of mere mortals who convince themselves that immortality is within grasp if they can only accumulate these treasures: fortune and glory. Then their names will be written in the heavens, their signatures scrawled in the stars to prove that their life had meaning and worth. We humans have always loved building our own towers of Babel up to the heavens in our feeble attempt to kiss the sky and claim eternity for ourselves. As Christians, though, we follow one who emptied himself of fortune, glory, and power to become like us. And yet, while we find ourselves so often flawed and frail and full of contradictions, the one for whom the angels sing invites us to step down off our selfish pedestals of fortune and glory to join Jesus in solidarity with the voiceless, with the powerless, with the disinherited, as we strive to touch the face of God by loving our neighbor as we love ourselves. As the Irish bard Bono sang in his song Mysterious Ways, if you want to kiss the sky, you better learn how to kneel. Our text today tells us the tale of two groups in pursuit of fortune and glory. Our first character is the wretched Roman puppet king Herod. Herod was a particularly hated ruler in Israel because he collaborated with the Roman Empire to amass his own fortune, glory, and royal comforts at the expense of poor Judeans suffering under the boot of Roman oppression. Our other characters are a group of scholars from a faraway land. Traditionally, we assume that there are three wise men from the east because of the number of gifts they bring the Christ child: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. We really don't know how many magi traversed afar, but we can probably assume they rolled into Palestine with a royal entourage, and when a crew like that comes into town, it's hard not to take notice. And the text tells us that Herod calls for them first because he receives reports that these magi have been cruising through Jerusalem asking to see the newborn king. And when King Herod hears there's a new king in the land, I imagine his first thought was, do what? So the wise men are students. The wise men are students of the stars. They study the celestial ceiling, searching for signs of good news of great joy. And their search has led them to the seat of power in Judea, King David's eternal city, Jerusalem. And Herod calls together the chief priests and experts in the law, and they brief him on Micah's prophecy from centuries ago concerning the Messiah coming out of Bethlehem. How convenient that Joseph and Mary traveled to Bethlehem to register for Caesar's census right when she gave birth. Don't you love it when a plan comes together? How perfect. The wise men ask, "Where is the child who has been born the King of the Jews? For we observed his star at its rising and have come to pay him homage." One commentator notes that the root of this phrase, to pay him homage, comes from the word to kiss. And more specifically, to kneel and kiss the feet of another as a sign of respect and honor. Feet are kind of gross, y'all. I think you can probably agree with me on that. I don't know when the last time you clipped your toenails was, but I imagine it wasn't a very enjoyable experience. Our feet are functional, but they're not really very decorative. My sister-in-law lived in Indonesia for some time as a child before moving back to the U.S., and when she first met my brother in our youth group, she was sitting on the floor next to the couch where he was sitting during a Bible study. And Cameron had his legs crossed, but not knee on knee. No, he was full ankle on knee with the sole of his Chuck Taylors pointed inches from Amy's face. And she, of course, informed him and said, "You know, in some cultures, it's rude to point your foot at a person's face." Fortunately, he learned his lesson and they lived happily ever after. So, for those of us, when we go visit an Eastern culture, remember, when you cross your legs, you're supposed to fully cross so that your knees stack on top of one another, not so that your ankle is on your knee, but your knees cross on top of each other so that your foot points to the ground and to the floor instead of pointing your foot at someone. Now, for some of us, that might take a few yoga classes to really be able to get into that pose. So if you travel to India, China, or Thailand, just keep your feet on the floor and you'll avoid offending anybody. For those cultures, the feet are the lowest part of the body. Therefore, they are the most dishonorable part of the body. So to pay homage, to kiss the feet of another in the world of Herod and Jesus, what a powerful symbol for communicating respect, devotion, for communicating honor, lifting up another person before you. Where is the newborn king so that we may come and pay him homage? And here we see these three wise men pursuing truth and the holy, not wise men hunting fortune and glory, who stoop to bend and kiss not the nail-scarred feet of Mary's son from Galilee, but the pudgy, sweet feet of the child for whom the angels sing. Excuse us, Mary, Joseph, we don't mean to interrupt this family gathering, but we have come so far, and from far, far away, to find this boy, to give him these gifts 3, fit for a king, and pay him homage, to kiss the feet of the newborn king. Little did they know, they were stooping down to kiss the feet of heaven. If you want to kiss the sky, you better learn how to kneel. Okay, so back to Temple of Doom for just a moment. One of my favorite scenes comes after Indy has been tortured in the famous battle scene with the evil priest. You might remember it as the Kali Ma scene, And fortunately, Indy wins and he grabs the sacred stones, and then as they're leaving, Willie, Indy's Bechdel test compliant love interest for the film, says, "Now let's get out of here." And Indy, covered in whip marks, turns and makes the most important turn in the film. And he says, "Right, all of us." And immediately the camera cuts to a crowd of child slaves being whipped by their slave masters as they push a mining cart through the cavern. And thus begins Indiana Jones's liberation of the child slaves in Pankot Palace. Iconic. Fortune and glory are no longer the goal for Indiana Jones. No, success is now defined by how successfully he can save not only these sacred stones, but the children whose humanity and dignity is worth more than this piece of treasure from antiquity. He got the fortune, but the glory comes in the good that he can do for those that he sees suffering. And we all know what fortune is because it's a quantifiable thing. Right now, we could all pull out our cell phones right now and check our fortune from the comfort of our very own pews. Now, whether or not you think you have enough fortune, well, that's between you, God, and the Treasury Department, of course. Glory, on the other hand, though, is a very elusive concept. I've always had a tough time with the idea of glory. We talk about it in church a lot. You hear the word glory a lot. In fact, here at Wilshire, our high school youth choir ensemble called Shekinah, that's the Hebrew word for glory. I used to think of glory as something that you could see because we would hear things like, "And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed." And I would imagine glory as some sparkly backlighting on the one who is being glorified. But no, glory is defined by the philosophers as the highest regard and honor that a person can receive from others. You don't glorify yourself, but you are glorified by others for your character, for how you treat people, for what you do with this one life that God has given you. You don't have power over your glory. It is a gift and a grace, and all true glory is God's. As George Washington sings in Hamilton, "Let me tell you what I wish I'd known when I was young and dreamed of glory. You have no control who lives, who dies, who tells your story." For those of us who claim the mantle of Christ, we must remind ourselves that in the kingdom of God, the first shall be last, and the last shall be first, and the poor shall be lifted up, and the dead who die in shame, hanging on history's crosses, become the victorious, glorified saints of God. God honors sacrifice, not success, compassion, not competition, humility, not self-glorification. If you want to kiss the sky, you'd better learn how to kneel. Herod and the wise men already have all the fortune and glory they need in the world economy, and yet the wise men prove themselves to be the wisest men because they are willing to see the glory of God in the illegitimate son of a broke Palestinian carpenter and his out-of-wedlock impregnated teenage wife. These wise men from an exotic land spent a small fortune traveling to bring priceless gifts to this child, and this royal entourage discovered that God shows up in the most unexpected places. And when you sense the glory of God, there is but only one response worthy of God's mysterious ways. If you want to kiss the sky, you'd better learn how to kneel. Don't look up to heaven to find Jesus. Look down to the earth, look around where your feet are firm on the ground, and there you will find the Christ in the most unexpected places. The people we might overlook, the people we might ignore, the people we might disregard, they are where Christ shows up. What if the wise men had walked up to Mary and Joseph's shack of a house and said, "Oh, it can't be this place. There's no way a king would live here. Let's just keep on moving, boys." They would have missed it. They would have completely missed it, and their trip would have been pointless and in vain because they didn't have eyes to see and hearts to believe that heaven can show up in unexpected places. My mom has a teaching supply store in Richardson called Teaching Etc. And recently, a new neighbor has showed up. And this neighbor's name is James. And James currently lives on the streets. He sleeps on a pallet in front of the store, and he came in the other day to politely introduce himself to my mom and her employee Marisol. And he asked if she sold any Dr. Seuss books because he wanted to buy some for his grandkids. She didn't have any, so she helped him brainstorm of other gift options and continued to talk to him about the weather and his life and just to be a neighbor. Notice she didn't try to fix him or preach at him about responsibility and self-reliance. She just valued him as a neighbor and treated him as a patron in her store, not as a public nuisance to shoo away. She honored him as one being created in the image of God. Of course, my mom would never tell you that that's what she was doing. She wouldn't give herself any glory for that, because when the gospel roots itself in your heart, love and kindness to your neighbor become as natural as your breathing. The arrival of the wise men marked the beginning of the season of Epiphany, the season in the church calendar when people realize just who this Jesus really is. And if we are willing to stoop down for a second, to extend a compassionate heart, a listening ear, an expectant eye, we might just find ourselves kissing the feet of heaven. Amen.